Okay, we're doing 25 as a halfway decent chapter. It's not super exciting. I ain't gonna lie to you right now. It's not super exciting. But it is a progression of the story that we're going through. So, if we back it all the way up, I didn't put those timelines in front of you. I'm sorry. I'm a slacker. But if we go through those timelines and we back it up, we see that at the end of his third missionary journey that he goes through, that's when Jesus came to him, or that's when the Holy Spirit came to him and said, "Don't go back to Jerusalem." He's like, "I'm going to go to Jerusalem." No, I don't go back to Jerusalem. There's bad stuff going on there. And he was encouraged to not go there. People encouraged him, led by the Holy Spirit, encouraged him not to go there. But he's still, in his dedication to what the Lord had given to him and put on his heart, he was willing to go the distance. Now, when he did get there, he was not there for very long. If we're jogging our memory, he was in Jerusalem but just a few days before he was grabbed up. They took him and they were beating him and all this kind of stuff. They grabbed him up and the Roman authorities, that's the word I'm looking for. The Roman authorities came, grabbed him, took possession of him before this mob killed him. And in that space, we've seen a couple of different things. So in the beginning, the first guy grabs him, the guy that's in charge of the city, and says, "Whoa, what are you guys doing? Let's hear what the problem is," right? Well, first off, he allows Paul to address the crowd. He's thinking, well, maybe I'll just let this guy talk it out. Maybe that'll calm things down. That didn't work. Then shortly after that, he brings him before the Sanhedrin, which is a collection of Pharisees, Sadducees, lawyers, that type of a thing. And that's the religious elite, the Jewish religious elite. And he brings it to them. And in that space, you see that those guys go nutso. What's the problem? They bring up a bunch of stuff that they can't prove or anything, just to cause problems for Paul in front of the Romans. And the Romans are just sitting back watching, okay, let's see what this is. They plead their case. Paul pleads his case. And as the Romans are sitting there watching this, they're realizing, well, we don't really have, they want him to die so bad, but he hasn't done anything worthy of that. You know what I mean? So they're watching. Paul makes the comment about the resurrection, and then all of a sudden the room erupts and they get all crazy, and he's going, the Roman guys are like, "Oh my gosh, this is nutso." Then they grab him and find out that there's a plot against Paul. So they spirit him away to Caesarea, right? From Jerusalem to Caesarea. And if we remember, the timeline on that is only about 12 days, remember? Because when he stands before the person in charge in Caesarea, which was, you remember his name? Felix. It had only been about 12 days since this whole thing kind of got out of hand. You know what I mean? So then he said, okay, well, we'll get your accusers down here. So the high priest at the time, which was, do you remember his name? Ananias. So Ananias comes, which the Jewish crowds were like getting all crazy in a frenzy, and they wanted to kill Paul. This was another piece of the puzzle. They wanted to kill Paul, and they were so desperate to kill Paul that they were trying to go to the religious elite, to the Sanhedrin, to the high priest and those guys, and go, "Hey, can you petition the Romans to bring Paul out from their care back to the Sanhedrin, to where they meet, and we're going to jump him and kill him." And that's when that plot got back there to them, and they spirited him off to Caesarea. While he was there, okay, well, let's hear your case. The local guy says we're going to kick it up the flagpole a little bit higher. We're going to kick it up the ladder a little bit higher to the next guy up. So, of course, that's when Felix gets a hold of it. And then the high priest comes with, members of that Sanhedrin, the Jewish people, and they plead their case. And once again, even Felix looks at this and goes, yeah, this is not that big a deal. Like, this is not really worthy of him dying, right? Like, this is not a thing. You guys are bent out of shape because, of this guy, Jesus, who you say is dead, and Paul says he's alive. That's not my problem. Like, he didn't commit any bad laws or anything. He didn't break any laws. This is just your thing, not our thing. You know what I mean? So then, of course, to ensure Paul's safety and to, kind of play to the Jews a little bit, he left him incarcerated. And do you remember how long he was incarcerated for? 2 years. So if we're looking at our timeline here, we see that his time in Jerusalem on his way to Rome was that couple of years, and he's had that time to sit there and kind of, wait out and do whatever is going on and figure out what's happening. And that was kind of the end of chapter 24. What happened was that Festus was holding on to Paul, and he gave a decree. This guy doesn't seem like he did anything wrong. We'll hold on to him. But in holding on to him, we're not going to hinder him from, if you remember, we're not going to hinder him from meeting with other people or seeing his friends or whatever. Like, he, basically he's kind of under like house arrest, type of thing. They put a thing on it, tracking thing on his shit. Yeah. No. But anyway, that type of a thing. And he was also thinking to himself, well, since this guy, maybe his friends will give him some money and maybe they'll bribe me to let him go and that type of thing. Who knows? Maybe that's his mindset, But it says in verse 27 that 2 years elapsed. But in that 2 years' time, there was also something else that transpired. Felix was succeeded by Festus. And desiring to do the Jews a favor, Felix left Paul in prison. So here we see that there's a changing of the guard, so to speak. Felix was trying to protect Paul as a Roman citizen, but appease the Jews. So he said, well, we'll just hold on to him. And he held on to him for a couple of years. But when Felix finally, he moved on and a new guy took his place, this guy Festus, that's where we kind of start in chapter 25. And that's where the whole thing kind of begins with this guy, this newly appointed governor, Festus, right? And Festus, if you remember, Felix, he had a wife who, studied Jewish culture, was kind of Jewish in that nature. So he had a background of stuff that dealt with the Jews, right? And that's why he was like, well, we'll do you guys a favor, but we'll hold on to Paul. It's, hopefully that'll appease people. But it's been 2 years now. And after 2 years, you would think that after 2 whole years, that the Jews would get over themselves. And that does not seem to be the case. Unfortunately, we're going to find out here because that does not happen. So this guy Festus, he doesn't have the same kind of background. He doesn't have the same kind of knowledge that Felix had because of his wife and stuff like that. But Festus is raring to go, man. He's ready to take office and take care of some business, right? So his first thing that he wants to do is he wants to see about cleaning up all the stuff that his predecessor left him. Sometimes that happens. You take on a new job, and when you take on a new job, there's always some loose ends that weren't, tied down by the previous guy. So he's thinking to himself, well, I want to tie down these loose ends, and then we're going to, hit the ground running doing what we got to do, right? So that's kind of, you can kind of think about that, and that's his mindset. I'm the new guy, but I'm going to take care of some of these things, get them out of the way so that we can move forward. And that's kind of the mindset that he's there. So if you're looking at verse 1, it says, now 3 days after Festus had arrived in the province, he went up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. So here, after 3 days, he was in Caesarea, probably being, you know, welcomed into his new position. Hey, you know, changing of the guard kind of thing, that type of deal. So from there, from Caesarea, he goes up to Jerusalem. Of course, that's the elevation, not the direction. And now he goes up to Jerusalem from Caesarea. Verse 2, and the chief priest and the principal men of the Jews laid out their case against Paul, and they argued him, and they urged him, I should say, asking as a favor against Paul that he summon him to Jerusalem because they were planning to ambush and kill them on the way. These two verses, verse 2 and verse 3, show that even after 2 years, what's still going on? Like, they haven't even come up with a new plan. Like, after 2 years, they're thinking, this is still the best we got, man. If you could just transport him back from Caesarea to Jerusalem and we'll try him and stuff, that'd be great. And sure enough, they're thinking, well, you know, while he's in transit, we'll jump him. You know what I mean? Like, this is still their big plan. All right. So after 2 years of Paul being incarcerated and everything, these guys still want Paul dead, still willing to do the stupidest thing ever by attacking a Roman convoy to try and kill him, and burn bridges with a brand new governor of that area. Like, how stupid do you have to be to want to do that? And yet that's still their plan. That's still their plan, right? So that doesn't seem like they're rational people that are going on, right? So here we kind of get an idea of what's really going on, and we get an idea of what the Sanhedrin's doing. We get an idea that they are not original thinkers, that they are still banging the same drum with the accusations that they had before. Maybe, just maybe, when they were talking to Felix, he had some pretty decent background information about the Jewish culture and stuff and the Jewish religion. Whereas this new guy, well, maybe he doesn't. He doesn't quite understand the Jewish thing. So if we throw a bunch of, you know, Jewish legalese to him or religious, you know, thing, then he'll cave, right? And that's kind of that was their first play, which didn't plan out. But they, once again, don't have another plan. So that's kind of where they're going to keep going in that same way. So here we see, starting in verse 4, as we go from there, Festus replied that Paul was being kept in Caesarea and that he himself intended to go there shortly. So after his little thing, so here we got Felix was in Caesarea, right? And he's basically the governor of this area of Judea. Okay? He's the governor of Judea. And his location, like his home base, is Caesarea. All right? So then the new guy, Festus, comes. He is then probably inaugurated or takes over that position as the governor of Judea. And that's his, you know, big place. But he knows that that Jerusalem is a big hub for, you know, the, you know, Jewish religion, stuff like that. Maybe he went to his desk, if there's a desk, and looks through all the stuff, the unsolved or you know, all the open cases that Felix had, and he says, "Oh, here's this one. Well, there seems to be some stuff going on. Well, let me just go to Jerusalem and check it out." Soon as he shows up there, of course, the religious elite go grab him. They're like, "Oh, this guy Paul." I'm like, "Dude, it's like 2 years. Let it go." But he doesn't say that. But what he does say is that now Paul's being held in Caesarea, and if you want to plead a case, I'm going back up there in a couple of days. You can come with me and plead your case. All right. So one thing that we can assume, but we will know is actually factual, and we do know it's factual from some of the other accounts that we've seen, is that even though you're dealing with like the first century, you would assume, well, they don't have the internet, and they don't have mail services, and they don't have all these things. You know, how do they keep track of stuff. Well, they do it the same way they've been doing it since obviously the first century. They write stuff down, all right? And they keep files on things. And we've seen before in some of the things that people would make notes of accounts of things that happened, and they would store those so that they had different things that were going on. Here we're going to see the same thing as we get to the end of this chapter, because they want to make some kind of record of what's happening, and they don't even know what to put on this record. So we're going to find that out here in a little bit. So we know that there are records. So if Festus gets into this position, I'm sure he's probably in the past few days, he's probably gone over some of the stuff, and he probably is apprised of the situation. He probably doesn't know the extent of it, but I'm sure he probably understands what's going on. And he probably read his predecessor's notes. Well, he's being held here because they might try and jump him. Okay, all right, fine. You know what I mean? So that's his statement there. Now he's being held there. You want to come plead your case, you come. So that is verse 4. Verse 5. So, he said, let the men of authority among you go down with me, and if there is anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him. Verse 5. Does anybody have anything different there?
I mean, not really. Therefore, you let the men of authority among you, go down with me and accuse him if there is anything wrong with me.
Right. So I think it's yeah. That's basically what we're looking at. What I'm reading right now is the ESV. The King James states a few things a little different. In this particular case, the King James does state a few words that we're going to cover in a good way. There, it actually has a really good depiction of some of these words. But what I'm trying to get at is basically in verse 5. Yeah.
In the New King James, it's explained. Let those who have authority among you go down with me and accuse this man.
Yes.
And then it says, to see if there is any fault in there. So it's like,
right.
It's like they're just throwing it up on to see what's going to stick.
Right. So here, if you were to read like the New American Standard Version or the Legacy Bible, it says, let the influential men among you go down with me. And if there is anything wrong about the man, let them accuse him. In the King James, it is, he says, let them, therefore, he said, which are among you, who among you are able to go down. The part that I don't like about that is that it's which among you are able. It kind of gives the idea in the King James, like somebody capable of traveling. Like if you're old, like if you're not old and you can come with me, you can come with me. No. I don't like that in the sense that some of these other translations give a better sense of what they're doing. He says, let men of authority among you go down with me. All right. So what is he saying? He's saying, okay, you stupid mob, stay here. Okay. I don't need you coming down and making problems. All right. If you want to come to Caesarea, those of you who have authority to actually make some kind of accusation, you guys can come. So in this, he's stating, A, I'm taking this seriously. Okay, I'm the new guy, but I'm taking this seriously. And if you want to come and plead your case before me, I'll take it seriously if you're going to take it seriously. That's the first thing he's saying. B, he's saying, and I'll take it seriously, but you need to be of authority to be able to do this. Like, I'm not just taking some Joe Schmo off the street that says, oh man, he, stepped on my foot, he should die. No, 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 no. We're not doing stupid stuff like that. Like, if you have authority to make that accusation, come on down. We want to hear it, right? And then he wants to make sure that he's clarifying that you're going to be making a charge against this guy. So you got to be specific about what he did, like what he did wrong, because these guys are asking for what? Yeah, they're asking for the death penalty. And you got to understand, in Roman culture, if you're a citizen or not a citizen, if you're a citizen especially, like, to get the death penalty, you had to do something worthy. Like, you had to have killed somebody yourself. Treason would be a good one, stuff like that. Like, if you don't just, oh, this guy, he said my wife is ugly, he needs to die, that doesn't work, right? So you got to make sure that you know what you're saying. So any man of authority among you, you can come down with me. And if there's anything wrong about the man, let them bring charges against him, right? So this is kind of setting them up to tell them, hey, I'm going to take this seriously, and I want you to come with me, and we will actually judge this thing properly. But you better have your A game with you. And you would think, remember, when they grabbed him, when they were in, when the magistrate of the area grabbed him, took him into the barracks and then they spirited him away to Caesarea. And then a couple of days later, they came up. They had a couple of days to formulate a plan, right? And their whole plan was to make up a bunch of lies and stuff. And Paul just said, prove it. And they went, and that's when he decided, well, this guy didn't do anything worthy of death. Like, he didn't go around and slaughter a village full of puppies. You know what I mean? The dude, you just argued about a theological point, and then they started arguing there amongst, the guy. So, I mean, it's like this is dumb. Like, this whole thing is dumb. The preface of this is dumb. I'm not going to sentence a guy to death because you guys can't figure out what your argument is. And you can't even prove half the stuff that you're saying. You know what I mean? So that was kind of the problem there. So that's, once again, why verse 5 says what it says. If you've got authority among you to make a claim, you better be ready for it, because I'm going to judge it properly, right? I want to make sure that we are judging it properly. And then in verse 6, this kind of tells you exactly what's going on. It says, after he stayed there for more than 8 to 10 days, he went down to Caesarea. So this guy came down to kind of check out some stuff. He had business there or whatever. He's new to the area. So he's probably just kind of tootling around, checking stuff out, right? So he comes 8 to 10 days. He goes down to Caesarea. And the next day, he didn't wait. As soon as he gets back to Caesarea, I'm taking this seriously. We're going to get this done. All right? As soon as he gets to Caesarea, the next day, he took his seat on the tribunal and ordered Paul to be brought. I like this concept. He takes his seat on the tribunal. If you're looking at blah, 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 blah. Oh, if you're looking at like the King James, New King James, verse 6, it says, the next day, sitting on the judgment seat, he commanded Paul to be brought. That judgment seat, all right, is the bema seat, okay? And back in the day, you always had a bema seat. So if you were to bring somebody in a local assembly or in a local judicial thing or whatever, they had the right to go to the bema seat. And it was basically just a rock, all right? The bema seat was basically something that you would step up on, and you'd be up above people, and you would proclaim your case, and then the judge would sit at that bema seat, and he would judge whatever's done. It's interestingly enough, in our eschatological study, all right, the bema seat is a big deal, all right, because you have a bema seat for good guys, and you've got a great white throne judgment, not good guys, right? So the bema seat is a fair and just way to judge things. So it's interesting that he uses that verbiage, even though it's not depicted here. It's good for us to know that, because this guy literally the next day, I'm taking this seriously. I'm going to sit on my judgment seat. I'm sitting on the bema seat. We're going to have an actual trial. We're going to see what's up. All right. So he's taking it seriously, and he wants them to do the same, because that's what he identified to them in the previous verse, right? And he orders Paul to be brought. So here he is. Okay, let's see what we got here. Verse 7, when he had arrived, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. I think that's interesting. Like, here he is being brought. If you remember the scene that was before, when the local guy grabbed him, they brought him to the Sanhedrin, right? The Sanhedrin, they had their people here, Pharisees, Sadducees, lawyers and stuff like that. Then there was Paul, and then there was all the Romans and stuff, and they're sitting in the back of the room just going, okay, let's get this going, right? This time, they try to be a little bit more intimidating, which I think is a little funny, because they still haven't changed their tactic at all. And Paul doesn't need to change his defense at all either. Because if they're going to do the same thing and not get any, like, why would you need to change your defense if the prosecution has no leg to stand on? Why would you change your defense? It's great for Paul, right? So here, they arrived, they came down to Jerusalem, and they stood around him, bringing many and serious charges against him that they could not prove, right? Paul argued in his defense, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. Okay, so here's his three-pronged actually, before we get into that part, it's funny, because if you're looking at that verse 7, it says, when he arrived, the Jews came down from Jerusalem and stood around him. I'm sorry, verse 8, the beginning of verse 8. It says, Paul argued his defense. All right? That, in the Greek, argued his defense is one word. It's a really long word, but that's how it translates into English. Argue his defense. The word is apologeo mia. It's where we get the word apologetics, is to defend against something or defend against the word of God and stuff like that. It's funny because here he stands up and he argues his defense. And what he's doing is he's instilling apologetics, all right, which is where we get that word. So I think it's kind of interesting. That's just a little piece of trivia for you trivia buffs.
What word is actually that?
Argued his defense. So in the
Just says,
and while he answered for himself, is what the New King James says. The King James says, while he answered for himself. Yeah. But a better way of phrasing that, a better translation of that would be Paul argued his defense. That argued his defense is that same word, apologetics, is where we get that word from. It's kind of
translation says, while Paul made the defense that.
Yeah, made the defense that. Yes. I like that concept, because he is making his defense. And that's where the word apologetics comes into play, right? So I kind of like that thing. So here, he now goes into his defense, and he says he has this three-pronged defense, all right, and he says that he has not committed any offense. Before we get to that, at the end, he says, neither against the law of the Jews, nor against the temple, nor against Caesar have I committed any offense. That word offense, right? That word offense, hamarteno, it's where we get our word hamartology, which is the study of sin. That word hamarteno is the word for sin. Okay?
My
Is the
translation says, I have not sinned at all.
Yeah, there you go. That's great. That's the word, sin. Okay? And it's the idea of doing something wrong, or going against what is supposed to be. So here he's basically saying, I have not sinned against the law of the Jews, nor have I sinned against the temple, nor have I sinned against Caesar. Okay? So that's kind of what he's saying here. And I think that's kind of awesome because he's taking it to that level, that level of commitment. Well, I haven't done anything wrong. Of course, every criminal says that. But he's making his point a little bit clearer because these guys have no leg to stand on because they have no proof, right? So the first thing he says is neither against the law of the Jews. What was their big argument? What was their big argument? It's been the same argument. So they've been arguing that Paul has been. No, they started a riot because of him, but they first were saying that he was.
Circumcision was not right.
No, but he was saying things against the law. That was their first thing. Oh, he's talking bad about the law of Moses. Against the law of Moses. That was their first thing. The second thing is, I have not sinned against the temple. What was their second thing that they kept bringing up? No. They kept saying that he was trying to bring a Gentile into the temple, right? So they were he was trying to defile the temple by bringing a Gentile in there, which wasn't even true. That's not even close to being anything that was real, right? So their first thing was, oh, he's saying bad things about the law of Moses, and he's trying to defile the temple by bringing Gentiles in. And then they try to bring up stuff that is civil law, and they've tried different things of civil law, which none of it stuck. None of it could. Because once again, if you're asking for the death penalty, what do you have to do to get that? Well, you got to kill somebody. You got to be treasonous. You got to do, it's the big ticket things. If you're going to get the death penalty, you must have done something really bad. And they're probably, this Festus guy is probably sitting there going, okay, I'm going to take this seriously. You got your accusations. This guy's been in jail for 2 years. Let's see if we can settle this case so I can move on. So he sits in his judgment seat. Okay, let's hear it. And they talk a bunch of craziness. And he's like, well, that doesn't really sound like much. It doesn't sound. And Paul says, I haven't sinned against the temple. I haven't sinned against the Jews, nor have I sinned against the temple, nor have I sinned against Caesar. Because he's a Roman citizen. That's why they're even in this predicament in the first place, to stand before them. So I haven't done anything against that. All right? So he doesn't have to get all crazy. They're all surrounding Paul, and they're making all these accusations, trying to intimidate him. And he's just sitting there going, like, I haven't done jack. And you can't prove it. And they're like, So, of course, verse 8, he argues his defense. Verse 9, but Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and there be tried on these charges before me? Now, this kind of brings us a little bit full circle back to where we began the whole thing, right? What did the Jewish elite, what did the Sanhedrin, what did the regular Jews want? What was their first request? Yeah, Paul, bring Paul back to us. I know this has been on your plate for a while. Tell you what, we'll take it off your plate. Just bring him from Caesarea down to Jerusalem. We'll take care of it. And they were going to jump him and try and kill him on the way. But that was a different story. But that was their intent. Just bring him down. We'll take care of it. So now here, Festus looks at the situation, and you could probably think in his head, because this is now who? This is the third guy that's had to deal with this. The local guy's looking at this going, these people are crazy. Like, there's no reason why Paul should be held by these guys. There's no reason for these guys to, but his life is obviously in danger. But they got no case. While kicking up the ladder. So he kicks it up the ladder to Felix. Felix looked at this situation and went, yeah, I got nothing. You know what I mean? I'll hold on to him because his life's in danger and because he's a Roman citizen. And after 2 years, then he is succeeded by this other guy. This other guy, Festus, has only been dealing with this for how long? Only a couple of days. And he's looking at this going, oh my goodness, this is done. Like, why is this? What is happening right now? You know what I mean? So this is kind of an interesting thing.
So why does Festus, why was he wanting to do a favor to the Jews? Like,
So,
to keep the peace? Because he doesn't really care about the Jews. They just have to pay him.
no, correct. But he is the governor of Judea. And in Judea, the reason why you call Jews Jews is because of Judea. All right. So the vast majority of the people that he deals with and has to deal with deals directly with the Jews. And even though he doesn't give a rip about their religious background or their religious, standpoints,
Just help to keep the peace.
yeah, he just wants to keep the peace and he wants to do this. And these guys are willing, after 2 years, these guys are willing to go the distance to try and get Paul. Like, seriously, like, you guys couldn't let it go. You know what I mean? And he's probably read the accounts of what happened before going, wow, these people are crazy. And then he sees these people, trying to intimidate Paul. And then Paul's like, yeah, I didn't do anything and you can't prove it. And then this Festus guy's looking at this going, yeah, this is dumb. Yeah, I don't get it. So his thinking is, let me see if I can't just get rid of this. Like, he wants to close this case and move on. So he's thinking, let me see if I can get rid of this. Paul, I know you're a Roman citizen and everything, but this is a religious matter that I don't really care about. So how about you go back to Jerusalem and just be tried with them, because you didn't do anything criminally wrong, Roman law criminally wrong. And that's all I really care about. This is a total religious thing. So how about you settle your religious stuff amongst yourself? How about you just go back to Jerusalem? You know what I mean? And have that out. Well, that's a bad idea. That's a bad idea on lots of reasons, because they want him dead and they're willing to do stupid things to make that happen. And Paul knows that. And I'm sure it was in the notes of the stuff that Festus read, but he goes to Paul. Like, he doesn't go to them. He doesn't make a ruling right now. He doesn't go to the religious, leaders and all that kind of stuff. He doesn't go to the high priest and all this kind of stuff and go, hey, I'm going to release him into your custody. Let's take him back. You take him back and you try him where he's at. No. Because he's a Roman citizen. He's got rights. So he goes to Paul. Paul, do you wish to go up to Jerusalem and be tried on these charges that are set before me? Because he's looking at these charges and going, these charges ain't going to stick. And they don't matter to me because I don't care. Because he didn't break any laws, like any Roman laws. So how about do you want to go back and just settle this on your own? Right, is what he's saying. Verse 10, but Paul said, I am standing before Caesar's tribunal. And he's in Caesarea, standing before the governor of Judea, of the Judean area. I'm standing before Caesar's representative. If I wanted to go back to Jerusalem, I could have done that 2 years ago. I'm here for my day in court, and I'm standing before you as the leader, as the representative of Caesar in this area. So he's kind of throwing this out there. Like, no, I don't want to go there. I'm standing before Caesar's tribunal where I ought to be tried. To the Jews, I have done no wrong, as you yourself know very well. He's looking at him going, dude, this is, dumb. Like, Stevie Wonder can see this is not, happening, right? So he's like, this is dumb, and this. Verse 11, if then I am a wrongdoer and I've committed anything for which I deserve to die, because that's what they're asking for, right? They're asking for the death penalty. If I've done anything that deserved to die, I do not seek to escape death. But if there's nothing in their charges against me, no one can give me up to them. I appeal to Caesar. So what he's saying is, do you want to just go with these guys and just deal with your own garbage? He goes, no. The whole point of me being here was to have my Roman day in court, and I'm here having this Roman day in court, right? And I am here because I didn't do anything wrong. And you know I didn't do anything wrong. And we both have that same understanding. He goes, if I did something wrong, I'm more than happy to pay the price. But you know I didn't do anything wrong. I know I didn't do anything wrong. And I'm here to have that day in court. So if this is not where I'm going to get to, I am not. I'm here to have my Roman day in court. And if you're trying to pass me off to somebody else, then he says something that is totally and utterly binding. Totally and utterly binding. He says, I appeal to Caesar. Now, this is a big move because every Roman citizen has that right. It's like saying, I'm appealing to the Supreme Court in our day. Like, I'm appealing to the Supreme Court. Like, if I can't get justice here, or if you're not going to do what needs to be done here, and you know, this kangaroo court is going to happen, then I appeal to the Supreme Court. I appeal to the highest Supreme Court of the land. I appeal to Caesar. Every Roman citizen has that right. But if you invoke that right, there's no coming back. There's no coming back. Like, you can't just say, well, I want to be heard by Caesar. Like, I appeal to Caesar. Then that guy won't go, well, we don't need to go bother with Caesar or anything like that. We'll just take care of it here. That doesn't happen because that's how severe this appeal is. In verse 12, then Festus, when he was conferring with the council, the guy's new to his position, right? So he's conferring with, the heads of, the different areas in his council, and he answers, to Caesar you have appealed, to Caesar you shall go. He knows that's a binding statement. You want to go to Caesar? You want to go to the Supreme Court? I can't stop you, right? So here, he was wanting to pass this off to somebody, and now he kind of got that. So that's a plus and a minus, right? Like, the plus side is, whew, thank goodness I don't have to deal with this because this was a sticky wicket. I'm brand new in my position, trying to make the Jews happy, and yet this guy is totally innocent. Like, I can see why Felix just locked him up for a couple of years, hoping that they just forget about it, but they didn't forget about it. So I'm new in this position, and this is already getting out of hand. And when he says, well, I want to go to Caesar, he's probably thinking, whew, thank goodness. Like, I don't have to deal with this. Rock on. But then on the downside to that is he knows the case. What does he know? He knows these guys have no proof. All their accusations are unfounded. And what they're trying to get him to admit, he will never admit because he didn't do anything wrong. The whole preface of the case is that they didn't like him because he in a religious way was not in line with them. And that has absolutely nothing to do with Roman law. On the upside, he's probably going, thank goodness I don't have to deal with this. But on the downside, he's probably thinking, well, now I got to send this guy to Caesar. What's Caesar going to think about this process? You know what I mean? Like, I can't handle my own business, and now I'm going to send it to Caesar. So he's probably thinking, on the plus side, I don't have to deal with it. On the downside, I needed to make this worthwhile. And we're going to see that downside thinking at the end of this chapter, right? At the end of this chapter.
When the Lord was, I guess, talking to Paul about what he was going to have to go through, didn't he say he would stand before kings?
Yes, he told him. He said, "I will stand before you to Rome."
Right.
And for sure that, and you would be speaking before kings and things like that. So absolutely, that's where we're.
Paul knew.
Yeah, so Paul knew.
He was going to get there somehow.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, to Paul, it's not a downside. To this Felix guy, to this Festus guy, he's probably thinking of the pros and the cons. But after he invoked his right to counsel to Caesar, okay, you want to go to Caesar? You're going to Caesar. Because all the council members are probably going, yeah, if he's a Roman citizen and you don't give him his rights, that's bad. And you just took this job and you probably don't want to get smacked down. Okay, yeah. All right. So that's what he does. Now, any thoughts on that? Verse 13. Now, when some days had passed, Agrippa the king and Bernice arrived in Caesarea and greeted Festus. All right. We've talked a little bit about Agrippa. This guy, King Agrippa, is Agrippa the second. Remember, he's the great grandfather of the original Agrippa who tried to kill, of Herod Agrippa, who tried to kill Jesus, right? Now, Bernice is the sister of Agrippa. History says some interesting things about her and about him too, about Agrippa II and Bernice. They are related. Their brother and sister. She was widowed from her husband, who happened to be her uncle also. And there are historical records that imply that Agrippa II and Bernice were kind of an item, even though they're brother and sister. Yeah, creepy. But so they were together a lot. You know what I mean? For whatever reason that is, we'll just say. All right.
He was the one that John the Baptist was accusing, that he got in trouble. He was sent to prison for that.
That was the first. No. Yeah, the first Agrippa. So this guy is in the line of Herod, the heretic line. But that was the first, I do believe, was the.
It runs in the family.
Yeah, it does. It runs in the family. A little crazy, and we're gonna see that because it's kind of funny how Luke words some of the stuff in here. I think it's kind of funny. We're gonna see that this guy thinks he's a big deal. But anyway, he is a king, the Agrippa II, the great grandson, not the grandson, but the great grandson of Herod the Great, who tried to kill Jesus, right? So, anyway, into verse 14, and as they stayed there many days, Festus laid Paul's case before the king. So they're there hanging out, and after a while, maybe, just maybe, Festus is thinking to himself, well, I got this weird case. Let me tell you what it's all about, right? In an effort to try and be as zealous as he can to close all these other cases that his predecessor left open. is a good word. In verse 19, it says, rather they had certain points of dispute about him, about their own religion. Now, the translation I'm using is religion. Several translations use the word religion, but the King James, even the New King James uses the word religion, but the King James itself uses a different word. What's the word it's used? Superstition. The word, the Greek word that's used there for superstition, for religion or superstition, the word superstition is probably a little bit better descriptor. And the reason being is because they're talking about religion in general. They're talking about people who have dedicated themselves to the worshiping of gods. You know, different kinds of gods, different kind of religious structure. That's why they use the word religion, because it's talking about people that have dedicated themselves to some sort of religious structure, believing in some kind of gods or whatever. The word superstition paints a little bit better picture, because here we see that they're looking at this from a different perspective. Roman guy talking to another Roman guy, very candidly. These guys, they're freaking out because not because he did anything wrong, he didn't break any laws. They're just mad about their own little superstitions. You know, they think this guy's dead. He thinks he's alive. This whole, you know, it's just their little tiff that they're having, right? And it has nothing to do with Roman culture or with the Romans. So the idea of the word superstition, I kind of like a little better, because it paints the picture mentally for us a little bit better than religion. The word religion, once again, it means fear of the gods or fear of the divine. It's believing in some kind of religious structure. They're just worried about their own little belief system. You know what I mean? They're just having a tiff over that, and that's all. And that's kind of what they're saying, right? So that kind of gives you the perspective of how they're viewing this, right? There's Roman law, and then there's, you know, what these guys believe. It's not really that important, and they're having a big tiff over that, right? About that whole thing. But that tiff was so big that it caused a riot years ago, you know what I mean? And they're plotting to kill him and that type of thing. So anyway, the whole crux of the thing is once again about Jesus, that Jesus died and that Jesus rose again. That theme has not left. Paul brought it up, and it's been carried forward. That's the whole crux of it. That's the whole gospel. They're complaining that, you know, the Jewish elite don't believe that Jesus was the Messiah, right? And they don't contend to believe the idea that the Messiah rose again. Like all the prophecies, the Jewish prophecies that came said that this guy would become born of a virgin, that he would grow and he would, you know, die for the sins of mankind, and that he would raise again. All these things were prophesied, and Paul is claiming Jesus did those things, and even though all the evidence is staring them in the face, they don't want to believe that. They don't want to accept that they killed the Messiah, because if they accept that they killed the Messiah, that means they killed the Messiah. Like, how dumb were you? But even Peter, you know, in Acts 2 told them, when you killed him, that was part of the plan. But now's the part to own it up, get over yourself, let's move on this new program that we got going on. And they wouldn't do that. They didn't want to do that. So here's that. That's the concept of this superstition that they're holding on to so dearly, right? Verse 20. Being at a loss, this is him talking to the king. Being at a loss on how to investigate these questions, I asked whether he wanted to go up to Jerusalem, and he tried and be tried regarding them.
But when Paul had appealed to be kept in custody for the decision of the emperor, I ordered him to be held until I could send him to Caesar. Here he's kind of throwing up his hands. You know what I mean? So whenever you make a decision, like think about human nature. Whenever you make a decision, if you make it a good one or a bad one, you're not really sure whether it's good or it's bad. You always want to try and throw it out there to somebody to see if they would agree with what you're doing. And in that space, they're reaffirming, yeah, you did the right thing, bud. Like, hey, you did the right thing. And then in your mind, you kind of go, oh, okay, good. Well, I'm glad. Somebody else, thought that was cool. You know what I mean? And I think that's what he's doing. Well, he appealed to talk to Caesar. So my hands are kind of tied here, type of a thing. He's kind of throwing that out there as the new guy to this king, right? And then we see him answer in a very kingly manner. He doesn't just roll over and let his belly get scratched. He says, then Agrippa says to Festus, I would like to hear the man myself. He doesn't just say, oh yeah, I can understand what you're saying. Yeah, good job, good move, right? No, he goes, well, I'd like to hear what he has to say, to see the extent and the validity of what you're talking about. He wants to hear it. So your kid comes to you and goes, my brother hit me. Oh my goodness, why are you hitting him? No. I got 3 kids. When Luke and Logan were growing up, Luke would run in there, Logan hit me. I didn't go, Logan, what were you doing? I said, what'd you do? That was my question to Luke. What'd you do? And then down the hallway, I hear Logan going, he hit me first! Like there's always a backstory, right? So here, he's showing a little bit of smarts here to the new guy. The new guy's like, well, he invoked his right to Caesar, so I'm just doing what the law says, And he doesn't just go, oh yeah, good move. He's like, no. I'd like to hear what's going on because I want to see the extent of what it is. So he's kind of using a little bit of smarts. And that's kind of an important thing for him. But in doing that, we see that he may have had another alternative motive, Agrippa, because he's a diva. And that becomes very apparent in verse 23, which I think is really, really funny. So, on the next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp. Do you have a different word? Does anybody have a different word than pomp? I have looked through several translations. That word pomp is like universal, right? And I think that's where we get that pomp and circumstance kind of a thing, that kind of an idea. I think it's hilarious, right? The word pomp in the Greek, phantasia, which is where we get our word fantasy, right? It's where we get our word fantasy. This guy's living in his own world, man. Okay, so what happened when Festus took on this case? What did he do? I'm going to take this seriously. The next day, when he gets back into Caesarea, he gets in his official robes. He sits on his judgment seat. We're going to take this seriously, right? He flexes his little muscle and, his authoritative muscle in Judea. Says, I'm the new governor. I'm going to take care of this. And then after hearing this case, he's like, oh my goodness, this stinks. Now I understand why he didn't do anything with it. Well, after hearing after the conversation that they have together, the same thing happens, but on a whole different level, like to the 10th degree. Sure enough, Agrippa, because he's a king and a diva, and his sister / whatever, show up in great pomp and circumstance. You think it was bad before when Festus did it. Here comes this king. He comes in there like he's a high roller, coming in there. And he entered, and they entered the audience hall, and with military tribunes and the predominant men of the city. Then, at the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. And Festus said, King Agrippa, and all who are present with us, you see this man about whom the whole Jewish people petitioned me, both in Jerusalem and here, shouting that he ought to not live any longer. But I found that he has done nothing deserving of death. And as he himself appealed to the emperor, I decided to go ahead and send him. But I have nothing definitive, or I have nothing definite to write to the Lord about him, or to my Lord about him. Therefore, I have brought him before you all, especially before you, King Agrippa, so that after we have examined him, I may have something to write. For it seems to me unreasonable to send a prisoner not to indicate the charges against him. Here we see that this is where the scene kind of ends for this chapter. That he comes in with his big entourage, and he comes in there into the judgment hall, into the courtroom, basically, right? And here we see that it says that that Agrippa came in, and he entered the audience hall with military tributes and with predominant men of the city. Who's not there?
The Jewish people?
Right. The Jewish people, right? The Jewish people are out of the picture. Why? Because Paul invoked his right to Caesar. You Jews is out of your hands. You might as well
They're
go home.
irrelevant. This is a Roman
Yeah.
issue.
You might as well just go home. Because this is now a whole different, this is taking it to a different level. So you might as well get out of there. So here, they all come together, and here they are. He says, King Agrippa, I've got to make an official report before I send this dude to Caesar. Because if I send this dude to Caesar without an official report with the accusations that are put before him and all that kind of stuff, if I don't do that, Caesar's going to look at me like, I can't handle my business. So I put it to you, you people, you military leaders, you tributes, all these people, and to you, King, that after you hear what's going on, you can help me write down what I need to write down to send this dude to Caesar. Because if I don't have something good to write down, he's going to look at this just like everybody else has looked at this and gone, this is beneath me. This isn't worth my time, So he's like, King, I need your help here to figure out what we're going to write down there. Because now it's to a different level. So when he first heard it, he was probably thinking to himself, thank goodness I don't have to deal with this. But then on the other side of the coin, he's thinking to himself, well, I got to make sure that I represent properly. And now we see that side of that coin coming out. Well, King, I asked for your help because I got to write something. I don't know what's right because we don't know what's going on. And that is where verse 26 comes in. And as before, I said that verse 26, or chapter 26. Chapter 26 is when Paul addresses King Agrippa, and we get our third of the three accounts of Paul's conversion in Acts. And that's where we come in to this whole process. Now understand, Felix had some good extensive knowledge of Jewish stuff, right? Festus, not so much. But King Agrippa II, he knows some stuff, right? Because his great-grandfather tried to kill Jesus. So he knows some stuff about Jewish culture and stuff, which is going to help. Because it's always easier to talk to somebody when they kind of understand some of the, what you're talking about. Because if you're talking to somebody that doesn't know anything, you got to do a backstory. Well, this is why this is, and da-da-da. Okay, so now we're going forward. You know what I'm saying? So that kind of helps a little bit. But that is where we now leave off. Is chapter 26.
So I have a question that, just to help me understand the context. Caesar is all over all of Rome.
Right, he's
The king, how much area does he have? Like, how many kings?
So think of it like,
Caesar have?
Governors.
yeah, you can think of it. So you have like
Festus is the governor.
right. So you have if you're looking at our government structure. So you have like a mayor, and you have a governor, and you have a senator, and you have representatives. Like regional representatives. There's levels, right? So if you go to your mayor, which is a smaller territory, right? It's almost like a territorial guy. Like if you owned a tire shop, you know, you have a general manager of that tire shop, right? He's over that store, which is like the first guy, the tribunal guy that found everything. He's in charge of those barracks. That's why he said grab them and take them back to the barracks. He's like the general manager of that store, that tire store. Then you probably have more than one tire store in that area. So then you have a guy that's like a district manager that is over those stores. Well, that's the next level, right? And then you probably have several different regions in that area that have like 3 or 4 stores. That's a regional director of those tire stores. You know what I'm saying? And then of course you have the VP that's in charge of everything. And you might have like 2 or 3 VPs. This guy takes the West Coast, this guy takes the East Coast, this guy takes the central area or whatever, But then of course you eventually get to the CEO. And it's the same kind of thing. You have like a mayor, and then you have a governor, and then you have, representatives, and then you have a senator, and then you have, the Senate itself as its own body, and then you have the Supreme Court, and then you have, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
The same level of layers there are. So with each, just like today, as it was back then, everybody wants to cover their own tuchus, right? If I make this decision and it's the wrong one, it'll look poorly on me. So let's see if we can kick it up the road a little bit and see if they can help me make that decision. So they do. They kick it up the road, and this guy goes, I don't want to deal with this because it's dumb. They want to kick it up the road too. Here's Festus kicking it up the road to Agrippa. Because of King Agrippa, who's has a bigger area, you know what I mean? If he looks at this and goes, yeah, this is dumb, then it gives validity to him, and it covers him a little bit,
So
and that type of
a
thing.
king, like the kings weren't like a dime a dozen. Like, there were just a handful of kings under Caesar. So King Agrippa really, like he was powerful. He wasn't one of 500 kings under Caesar.
Yeah, there was a few, but
Yeah,
not that.
but okay.
So yeah,
Who was the most powerful out of all of these guys?
well, Caesar is. He's the highest authority. He's like the CEO of a company. He's the highest authority. But King Agrippa is like in a whole region. You would really have to do something bad to get an audience before King Agrippa, which is why this is so funny and ironic at the same time, because Paul was told that he would have an audience before kings. And the reason why he's being held is so asinine that it should never have gone beyond the first guy. Should never have gone beyond the first guy. Never. Right? It's so silly. Like it never should have gone past that guy. And yet it did. And then it shouldn't have gone past the next guy. And yet it did. And we're going to see it's going to go by the next guy. And that, you know what I'm saying? I think it shouldn't have happened. Because you look at everybody looks at this thing and goes, psh. Think about the day or the night, I shouldn't say the night that Jesus was incarcerated. He had six different trials that night, which was unheard of because nothing happened at night. But yet they took him from one guy, and this guy was like, this is dumb. I don't want to deal with this. Send it to this guy. This guy looked at it and go, I don't want to deal with that guy. Send it to this guy. No, send it back to him. No, send it back to him. You know what I mean? He just got shuffled around because nobody wanted to make that decision. And in the end, they tried to make a decision that would have been the easiest. It's a layup. Here's Jesus, this dude who did nothing wrong, versus this mass murderer. Who do you want to let go? The mass murderer or this dude that's never done anything? And you would think that's the easiest decision you could do, right? Here's this crazy terrorist freak, and here's Jesus, And yet they picked to let this guy go. You're like he's, the authorities are probably going, Okay, that didn't go the way I thought, but whatever. You made your decision. It's out of my hands. Here you go. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where we're at. Does that have any thoughts, comments? Awesome. Chapter 26, next time, we'll look at the similarities between the different accounts and all that kind of stuff. Until then, let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this time to look at these verses and to understand how this is all building up and building up. Something that seemed so small, but the conviction of these religious Jewish elite was so profound, even though they were in such a wrong state, and their commitment to that lie, to that sin was so great, they were willing to take it as far as they were. And it's now, the more energy you put into it, the bigger it's become. And here we are to such a great degree. And everybody who looks at it saw that it was not as big as it needed to be, but it was just being inflated because of the temperament of these Jewish elite. Dear Lord, this study, hopefully, is a case study for us to see how mankind reacts to the things and the stimulus of this world. Sometimes the people and the things of this world, it doesn't even always revolve around Jesus. It revolves around that sin, that lie. They were so committed to it that they're willing to go the distance and do whatever it takes. And we've seen that happen time and time again, even today in the 21st century. How people in their lives and their ideologies and things are willing to go the distance, even to harm other people, just to prove their point valid. Dear Lord, help us in our sinful state. Help us in our sinful nature. You provided your Son to take away our sins, and yet that sin nature is something that wars against us, inside of us all the time. It's Jesus' love and your grace and compassion versus our pride and stubbornness that is imposed on us from this world. Dear Lord, help us to look at this, really take it to heart. Help us to understand our shortcoming as we move forward in your grace and your love towards other people. Thank you, dear Lord, for this time that we can spend in this and look at the lunacy and the craziness of it all. And yet we see it happening even today over and over again. So help us to be sensitive to that. Help us to pray for those people in leadership. Help us to truly honor those who are making the hard sacrifices to bring about truth and justice. And help us to just stick to you in all that we do. Thank you so much, dear Lord, for this time. We take it, we lift it up to you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. It reminds me of President Trump, how everybody's after him
All the time.
all the time.